It's like, wow, this here life ain't nothing short of beautiful. I mean, wow, this here life ain't nothing short of beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pressure make diamonds, pressure burst pipes. Pressure main thing, make me lose sleep at night. Pressure keep me active, pressure ain't passive. Pressure make sure we ain't just cool, we relaxing. There's one thing I know in this young life of mine, is that pressure either sharpens you or kills you on sight. Am I right? When I'm flowing, ain't no time to be polite. Hit me up in 24, let me know if you alright. There's beauty in the struggle, there's beauty in the fall. There's beauty even though you're no longer in my arms. There's beauty in the chaos, there's beauty in the calm. In reality, beauty is wherever eyes behold. We make the music, make your souls work. Tell me how you getting fed, cause your heart seem malnourished. One grain on a sandy beach, made his way to the water, all he wanna do is see like, wow, this is life and it is short of beautiful. I mean, wow. Just the fact that I'm alive, keep a man awake. It's the pure things, yeah, yeah, the pure things. No matter what, don't forget about the pure things. Caffeine for the heart rate. Just the fact that I'm alive, keep a man awake. It's the pure things, yeah, yeah, the pure things. No matter what, don't forget about the pure things. It's so relaxing, smoothing the waxes. Whole wide world in my hands, call me Atlas. Road to Damascus. Not a lot of traffic, but don't go fast, cause I promise you'll miss. Got the knowledge on deck, but to learn is to live. Just be wary of distraction, the buzz in your ear. White noise all around, but the vision is clear. Yeah, the vision is clear.
Yeah, yeah.
We no kid, we no play. We pay full price for choice we make. We think too hard before we chase, so we apologize for wounds we make. It smiles the difference between dime a dozen and diamond and rough. Be careful not to get caught up and hurt yourself. Truth is, this love thing ain't as simple as it seems. So much so that I could probably write a novel explaining all the ways to lose the things that are good to you. I apologize in advance for the melodrama. I digress and finesse my way back to the flow. You don't need jewelry, sweet darling, keep telling you, your whole body glow. Yeah, your whole body glow. Drown me like the sun. How much time has to pass before my work is done? Oh, the evergreen is my palm tree. My mind's free, getting warm by the fire, singing you to sleep. Memories of you tattooed on my past, while I'm soaking in the cool water, yeah. Don't think I'm silly thinking good things can last. I know I'm young, but I'm still cool on her, yeah. Tongue like silver and a heart of gold, but riches mean nothing, my friend, if you neglect the soul. If you neglect the soul.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the 6th episode of the Fresh Perspective podcast, and it is called Processing Towards Healing. I look forward to going through all of the things we will discuss today with these two individuals who I hold near and dear to my heart as brother and sister. And we will discuss a lot of great things that will pertain to many of the people's lives who are watching today. So without further ado, we're going to allow these two to introduce themselves, starting with my sister.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Elissa Wingfield. I am a graduate student right now at Westchester University, studying higher education policy and student affairs.
And my name is Joshua Smith. I am a counselor, so a mental health therapist. I got my master's degree in counseling 2 years ago from Eastern University, and I'm currently a therapist there as well as working in private practice.
All right, that's good. That's great. If you all are, whoever's tuned in right now, that is just the tip of the iceberg for these two. These two are just brilliant individuals and have added greatly to my life. We talked last week about a song called No Water Here, or it's called No Water, but in the song it says No Water Here. And so I want to just add that these two are people who are definitely people in friendship and in relationship that are reciprocal. So it's not a thing of that they're taking, and that's it. So they add to your life, and you're going to see that today. So I'm going to stop talking because I can talk about these two for many different reasons so much.
Oh, man.
But
Bar is up here.
If you could just give us a little insight as to where you're from, and I guess where you're from, just the culture of where you're from, just a little bit, just a little insight to that.
I'll let Josh go first since I talked last time.
Thank you. I was initially born in Springfield, Massachusetts. I moved to Upper Darby around the age of 6. So I got that I'm not from Philly complex. Which means I have a little bit of that toughness with a little bit of that suburbanness mixed in, but being close enough to see some of the things that are going on and have friends that are in those things, but then far enough out where it didn't completely kind of overtake me. So I think that was a really big influence of being just close enough where like I got it, I experienced it, my friends were there. But then still having that heart to help. So that's how growing up in that part of Delaware County shaped me.
Well, I am from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I think anyone who's from Harrisburg always has to say that it's the capital because everyone thinks it is Philly. So we're like, no. It's Harrisburg.
Let them know.
So they don't know, and I will educate you. So it's a relatively small city, especially in comparison to Philly. It's about 2 hours from Philadelphia, more towards the central part of the state. It's interesting because I grew up in the suburbs. I moved from, it wasn't so much inner city Harrisburg, but I moved from, I guess more so the city life to the suburbs when I was around 6. So interesting that we have that connection. Josh, we kind of changed lives a little bit. But my high school was pretty diverse. I mean, when I went to college is when I went to a school that was diverse. So then when I kind of saw the opposite of that, I'm like, that's interesting. Everyone has a different, idea of what diversity truly means, but we can talk about that later. So very interesting experience. It taught me a lot, as I'm sure Levi has many questions. We'll get into that. But it's definitely shown me different perspectives just from being Black. There is no one way to be Black or to be African American. There's no one way. So if I learned anything in my childhood, it is that there is no one way to be who you are if you are a Black person.
That is really good. I really like that because I think sometimes we get just kind of pinned to one thing. It's like a one size fits all. So they assume that all of us like rap music, where there's some that don't. They might assume that we all like fried chicken and watermelon, where there's some of us that
brother hates watermelon.
Yeah, so it's amazing. And honestly, I'll say fried chicken is very good. And watermelon is also good. I'm admitting that on air because I'm one. Many might know that I don't really like to go buy and purchase watermelon out of the supermarket because of the historical implications. So I'll admit that on air today. It is good, and I'm not ashamed of it. I'm going to eat my watermelon and have a good time. I don't care what anybody thinks about it.
Let that go.
So y'all just freed me up right in the beginning of this show. My mom is probably proud of me now. But
finally.
So I just want to get to know you a little more and just say the next question is, what is your favorite color and what does it make you feel?
That's
so
no, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So my favorite color for a long time is purple. And I don't know why it's always been purple. I don't even have a lot of purple clothes. It was just purple. And then I realized that it's actually cobalt blue. It's like a really vibrant blue color. It looks fantastic on melanin. Maybe that's why it's my favorite. Let's be honest. No need to be shy here. It's a fierce color. It's like a royal color. It's just stunning to me. And so that is my answer. It is now cobalt blue. You should Google it. You should get some if you don't already have it in your closet.
All right.
I would say my favorite color is green. And it's funny because you sent us the questions either yesterday or the day before. And I went on a walk with my wife and I was like looking at trees and stuff. I was like, how does this make me feel? And I was like, it doesn't necessarily make me feel anything outside of more like myself, if that makes sense. So it's not necessarily like a happy, sad, calm. It's just, it feels natural. And I think that's as much thought as I could have put into it as I was walking and trying to have a conversation with my wife, that it wasn't much thought to it. And I think that's okay to have those things sometimes, that like, I like that. And it doesn't have to mean this big special thing. I just like it. So, yeah.
Okay.
I think sometimes the simple things bring us the most joy.
Yeah.
And we overcomplicate things a lot of the time in life, the older you get. So like seeing something from a child's perspective is like one of my favorite things. I'm sorry that I'm like segueing into something else, but that just made me think good. Like I love to watch my nephew learn new things. He's 6 months old and like there's just so much joy in the simple things with him. And so I think like even something as simple as color, Josh, like it just, you don't have an explanation for why it's your favorite. It just is.
Right. Absolutely. No, I definitely agree with that. I'll throw mine in there. Mine is gold. Grew up with it being red. Red to me signified, now that I trace it back, I would have to say the red kind of fascination came from being like growing up and watching Michael Jordan dominate the 90s. And everybody knows I'm a LeBron fan. They know I argue for LeBron all the time. But after watching his documentary, I had to just come to grips with what I always knew, but just vocalize it and say, Michael Jordan is the GOAT. And so I think Red was my fascination with Michael Jordan growing up, and him being on the Bulls and that, and just watching them in that red, like, and watching him dominate and watching their team dominate. But now it's gold, and a lot of it has to do with just like, it just makes me feel like royal. It just makes me feel more than, and we'll get into that later, more than what society has treated us as. So it makes me just feel like, it makes me feel like a king. And me feeling like a king doesn't come at the expense of anybody else, because I believe Josh is a king. I believe you're a queen. So, Elissa, so it doesn't come at the expense of anybody else. If anything, me thinking in that way, to me, helps me to, treat people with respect, and that they are the kings and queens of their own world and domain, as far as their sphere of influence. But the next question would be, what is one of your favorite songs? It could be either throughout your whole life or it could be currently. And also on top of that, what is one of your favorite movies? Again, it could be throughout your whole life or currently. And why? Why are those two your favorite in those categories?
Well, Josh, you can go ahead.
I can't think of a favorite song. I think part of that is like the target moves a lot for me in terms of like what I like at a moment. Favorite movie, I really want to get in the Chocolate Factory. I think there's like two things attached to it. It's one of my mom's favorite movies, so like a great childhood memory is like watching it with my mom. And then second, Gene Wilder was just magical through that entire movie in terms of playing playing it just straight enough, but then that whimsical nature to him. So it just reminds me of my childhood and just being enthralled in that role. Even as an adult, like, whenever my wife asks me, what do I want to watch? Like, that's always in my Netflix list. That's on Prime. Anywhere I can find it, it's there in my watch list, kind of queued up, ready for one of those days where I need it.
Okay.
Interesting. So my favorite song, I had to think about this one because, again, I guess I would agree with Josh. Like, my target moves a lot. I like a lot of different styles and types and genres of music. So I can go into, I have a favorite song, I think, for whatever mood that I'm in. So I went through a period a few months ago where I was just listening to a lot of like R&B, and I do that all the time, but like newer artists. And so there's this artist, her name is, well, her actual name is not Her, but her stage name is Her, Her. And she's amazing. She's wonderful. She has a song called I'm Not Okay. And that song for me just, got me through some things. And it's just about acknowledging and accepting and moving through whatever you're going through. It could be pain, it could be strife, it could be whatever emotion that you're feeling, you're not okay about it. And I think that, again, sometimes we try to make life more than what it is, or we like to add a lot of fancy words to things to explain them. And sometimes it's as simple as not being okay. And just admitting that and owning that and not trying to always grow from it. Because I think that sometimes we're, not everyone, but I know personally, I'll acknowledge something about myself and I'm like, okay, well, that's not good. So we're going to try to, work through that and be a better person. I think that we all should do that. But sometimes you can just admit and and just sit in that moment and not always try to grow from it, to just like acknowledge it with yourself and just kind of sit with that discomfort and sit with that pain or sit with that sadness and then go. So long answer, I'm Not Okay. By Her. Changing gears, my favorite movie is not a classic. I don't think anyone will really know what it is. It's the movie She's the Man. It's Amanda Bynes is like the main actress in it. It came out in like 2008 maybe. My older sister and I used to watch it a lot when we were in high school and college, and I used to watch it like every single day almost. So I know all the words to it, and I just think it's a silly comedy, and it's like a loose interpretation of Shakespeare's why'd I even say that? Because now I forget what the play is.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna, I can't, it's over my head. But it's loosely based on a Shakespearean play where a girl dresses up to be a man so she can, I think in the play it's like so she can be in the play, but in the movie it's so that she can play soccer. It's ridiculous, and I don't know if it's in.
I know the movie.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I know the movie. I know the movie.
I don't know why I'm so
was it a
surprised.
Disney or Nickelodeon film? It might have been a Nickelodeon film.
It never was released on. It was like in the theaters. It wasn't on Disney or anything. So I think it was like some. You know.
I know I saw it before on
company.
TV, so I don't know who played it, but
Probably.
I did see it before.
Yeah,
I did see it before. I know what you're talking about. We're not gonna leave you out there on the island. I know what you're talking about.
I was prepared to be on the island all by myself. I was so ready to be like, you know what? No one's gonna know it. That's fine. It's an odd movie, but it's a classic to me.
Okay.
So, I just like to be silly. I'm a silly person, and so that just kind of ties in, I guess, to my humor.
Oh, look, absolutely. So I guess I got to share mine. Mine is right now No Commas by D Smoke. And the reason why is because he goes into a lot of the things that I think about. A lot of the things that I've had conversations with both of you at different points about the things that he talks about in the song, as far as like basically just trying to make it as a people and trying to not just survive but move into thriving. He talks about the system and things like that, as far as how the system is designed to keep us in a certain place. But there's also this energy in the song that's like, we're not going to allow the system to keep us there. We're going to tear the system down and rebuild it in a way that we're incorporated into the system. And not just us, but all people who are coming from marginalized identities. Because he's a brother who actually is fluent in Spanish, as he's actually a Spanish instructor as well. So he does a lot of mixing and that's why I like it too. He does a lot of mixing. He'll speak, he'll rap in Spanish, and he'll go back in the middle of a song. He'll go back and forth and do that. So he was on that Netflix show with Chance the Rapper. I forget what it was called.
Not Nicki. Cardi B,
T.I. I think T.I. is like the executive producer of it. And so they might all three be actually, but he was on there. So he's really dope. He sounds a lot like Kendrick Lamar in his voice wise and his cadence, but he's from Inglewood, so it kind of makes sense. Gotcha. They're from the same like region. So yeah, but that's my favorite song. My favorite movie, of course, everybody knows. I talk about it in school, talk about it in class. You would think I was a 11 or 10-year-old boy. I talk about it in grad level classes all the time and try to bring it into like every conversation I can. And people just love it. They get a kick out of it. But it's Black Panther. I even appeared on some stuff that we had to do for class with my Black Panther helmet, my actual fit, like I could fit over my head. And so, that's my favorite movie. And because to me, it just combines so many of the different cultures that are on the continent of Africa into one culture of Wakanda. And to me, that's important because as a diaspora, we're so disconnected from our origins. So it just gives us a glimpse at so many different types of cultures. I've done time doing light research and seeing what each part comes from. Like each of the tribes of Wakanda have their own kind of like culture that they bring to Wakanda as a nation. And they actually come from actual, tribes within the continent of Africa. So it's just interesting. It gave me something to think about. And it's like an ideal, it's like the ideal world in the sense of, for us being able to have like a legit culture that we can be proud of. But then there's that unity as well, which is kind of prevalent through the whole movie within that. But then it's also the aspect of not going so tribal that you disconnect from the world that T'Challa was struggling with. And so there's that kind of tug of war, like I guess between him and Killmonger, that kind of shows a tug of war of like where Killmonger's like divide and conquer, like we need to split away from the world, use our tools to hold the world accountable. And then T'Challa's like, well, I want to help the world. And then so there's kind of like that duality where it's like I think every Black person has kind of thought about that, like, we need to split away from the world and have our own thing, and then we can love and respect each other. And this brings us into like the next kind of segue into the next section. First and foremost, I want to start with this question. It's important. It's a very short answer. Do you prefer to be called Black or African American, or do you view the terms as interchangeable? Why?
I think they are for some people, but not everyone who's Black is African American. Um, so I used to not like, I it used to bug me when white people would say Black. I don't know why, but like I would be fine saying Black, obviously, and like me saying someone's white. But like if I heard a white person say that person's Black, I'm like, why? And I don't know why. That was like when I was younger. But I guess to me, they are now more so interchangeable, but at the same time, gotta recognize that not everyone identifies as being African American. And so you might be Black, but not African American. So I might say that someone else is Black, or if I know that they are for sure African American, then I'll say that about them. But it doesn't mean as much to me as it used to before, as far as like someone who is not Black saying it to me. But I think if as a white person, I'd still prefer for them to say African American. This probably doesn't make sense, but I don't want them to call me Black because like it minimizes who I am. I don't know why I feel that way. Maybe one day I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I feel similar in that I think they can be interchangeable depending on how you identify. So for me, they're interchangeable, but a part of that is understanding the history of the terms and how often or for how long African Americans or people of color in America have been trying to define themselves. So it's been African American, it's been Afro American, it's been Negro, it's been Black, and it's all a part of trying to find that definition and that identity in it. So for me, they're interchangeable, but that was a part of a journey of kind of figuring out how have we identified in the past and why haven't those stuck. And similar, I there's a part of me that recoils some when white people say Black compared to somebody else. So you're not alone in that. And I can't completely identify what it is, but there's definitely just something that sometimes, and not all the time, but sometimes just hits my ear different if it's said from kind of white people in a different culture. I mean, I try to kind of monitor my response to that and make sure that I'm not like kind of responding harshly based on my own past experiences. But it's definitely something hits differently when I hear different people say it.
I'm thinking now, as you were talking, I was trying to think, like, try to pinpoint the reason. And maybe it's because I feel like there's always, there what used to be a plural for Black, like it was like Blacks, and which I think is like derogatory. And maybe that's why, I mean, I'm not trying to like reach for a reason, but maybe, you know, because I feel like a white person could just be white. They wouldn't refer to themselves as whites. But Black people were Blacks at one point, and maybe that's kind of why I personally am like, it's not sitting well in my spirit. I'm not feeling it.
Is put in front of it, so the Blacks, and that has a connotation to it that's uncomfortable. So sometimes even when it's not put that way, it can feel just off.
Yeah, again, language is so important.
Yes. And I share the same with you all. I personally view it as interchangeable. And I see also where I like to respect others. Some people prefer, I've noticed that a lot of the older generation prefer African American. As far as I'm talking about born probably before the 70s. They prefer African American, who I've interacted with, I should say. And many of those who are born probably after the 70s, so maybe like the 80s up until now, they tend to go by Black. And some of them, a good handful of them, who hold to those kind of older, values, will say African American. That whole idea of like the Blacks, and even when we look at statistics, the whole just lumping any of the groups, but particularly the way they use statistics against us, it just seems so detrimental and harmful. It doesn't a lot of times for the different intersecting identities, particularly when we look at socioeconomic. It doesn't account for that, which attributes to a lot more of our issues than actually just being of African descent. But they would lead you to believe that if you hear people talk about the stats, any of the stats, it leads you to believe that the primary issue is being of African descent. And so that's where, to me, it makes me cringe when they say black, because my experience as a black person is different than both of y'all's, and different than any other black person. There may be people who come close and are similar, but there's a lot of nuance that is left out when we look at just saying, oh, black or the blacks, or this is what black people, this is the stats for black people and this, that, and the third. But yeah, I mean, I view it as interchangeable. I view black as the rebel that I am. I view that as like a statement, a proclamation, like I'm black, like, and you're gonna deal with this. Toby, and I'm gonna end with this song. Toby Maguire, remind me, don't let me forget, y'all, to end with this song. It's a song called Hella Black. And in the song, the lyrics say, your fault if you're offended. I'm just hella black. That's one of the like prominent lyrics in the song. He says a lot of things that are really great, but that's like a statement right there. It's your fault if you're offended. I'm hella black. Like that's just who I am, and I'm not going to stop being that. And I think we have to, as black people, get to that place, and that looks different. Because in the song he also mentions, like, it's not what I say, it's not what I do, it's not what I wear. I'm just black. I'm hella black. Like whether I like anime or whether I like rap and hip hop and what they classify as ratchet stuff, I'm black either way. Whether I'm a scholar or whether I care nothing about the academic world, I'm black. Like, and it looks different. Even if I love the academic world, you might catch me and look at me and be like, we're gonna have our masters next year. Josh has his masters. There'll be times when you see us that you won't be able to guess that we have our master's degree. And that's okay. Like if you see me on the basketball court, you're not gonna guess that I got a master's degree, right. But you're gonna know I'm a competitor, right. but you're not gonna know I'm an intelligent black man. So there's those aspects as well. But let's move into the first kind of question to unpack. And that is, what was your earliest experience with the concept of race? How did it make you feel? And I'll repeat that so everybody can understand what I said. What was your earliest experience with the concept of race, and how did that make you feel?
Josh, do you want to go first?
I'll go first. I think it's interesting that I can't remember my first experience, but I think a part of that is because I've always known that I was a black man in the context of how people treat me. And I think some of that is because I'm biracial, because my mom is white. I had just a visual kind of immediately. The place where I'm from in Massachusetts is pretty conservative. So then you have, being an observant child, I'd see that people would look at my mom funny, or people would say like weird things like, oh, you're doing such a good thing. Having a baby? Like what? She had a baby. That is a good thing though. I mean, my mom, I said, thank you, I'm glad that you had me, love you. So I think I've always kind of had that conception of race. I think the place where it was most, and my mom, to her credit, she never like really raised me as mixed. Like she was very clear, you're a black man. When you leave this house, you are a black man. The world views you as a black man. So like that whole you're mixed thing, that wasn't really a thing for my mom. But probably the most clear in terms of like having to question it, I might have been like 8 or 9 years old. We were already living in Pennsylvania at the time, but I went back to Massachusetts to visit. And I have 2 younger cousins on my mom's side, so they're both white. And I'm having a good time with one of my younger cousins. He has to be like 3 or 4. And we're like, literally, it's a normal cousin interaction. And then he runs away, and I guess he thinks I'm out of earshot. And he looks at my mom and he says, "Why is Josh black?" And the way he said it, like he probably didn't mean anything bad by it, but it just struck me as like he was so perplexed by it that what was otherwise a fun interaction, there was something that was ticking in the back of his head trying to figure things out. And I remember just I felt confused, and I didn't feel confused at like my blackness. I felt confused at why was it important in like playing catch in the backyard? Like, why is this important for you to run off and kind of in earshot? So I think I've always known, but that was the first time where I had a feeling really confused at why it was as important to him in that moment as it was.
So it's funny because I had something in mind that I had shared with one of our classes that Levi and I had last semester, talking about our first, moments of realizing race or our race and other races. And so I'll share both of them because it's kind of changed now a little bit. Because I really didn't know initially, like Josh, I didn't know. I was like, who's to say? But the thing that I thought of in class was in like first or second grade, where one of my classmates who was white asked me why my gums were black. And I was like, bro, I don't know. Like, I'm same age as you. I don't have an answer for you. But then I was like, why are they black? And I don't understand. It's like such a trivial thing, when you're a kid, but it was just like something that was different about, me being black and him being white. But I recently found a diary of mine from like that grade, because my family we're Black people. It's so beautiful because like we're so many different shades of brown, and my family is one of them. I think Josh can attest to that too, that there's different shades in that family. And so, but I knew we were black, but there's just so many different shades. So I really didn't think of it as like, a thing or meaning that we were part white or part something not black or whatever that meant. But in my diary that I found a few weeks ago, I wrote in it and I had said, I was like, dear diary, being like a kid, dear diary, I love so-and-so, he's so cute. And I had a crush on this kid, Zach. And I was like, he's amazing. Or I couldn't spell amazing at that age, but like, he's so cute. And, but he doesn't like me. And I was like, he's white and I'm black and I'm ugly. And when I read that, I started to cry because I felt so bad for young Elissa for thinking that because she was a different color than this boy, that was ugly. And, that's the sad thing for a kid. I mean, obviously I've overcome that and like Zach can just, whatever, hope he's doing well, but whatever. But, at the time I was like, oh my God, my heart just ached, because I think every Black child will have that moment where they're like, where they feel like they're less than, or they feel like their color dictates, their worth to the world or their worth to this person they have a crush on in second grade. And it definitely shouldn't, but it does. And it has, and it probably will for somebody else. But it was just like, it just blew my mind. And I just was like crying. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Why am I crying? This poor girl. I wish that I could go back and just tell her like, girl, you'll be fine. You'll be A-okay. And just because you're black and he's white doesn't mean that you're ugly. But, you're a kid. So you don't know.
Oh, that's I share the similar type of story, but the finding of that was a lot different. Of course, I wish I would have been journaling and writing things down, but
very emotional
that's a whole other thing on like masculinity at a young age. You learn like that's not like men are not supposed to do that kind of stuff. You learn that that's not the truth. I think journaling is very important, and I think a lot of it. I mean, I write music and things like that. I'm not a professional artist by any means, but I enjoy writing music, and I think that was my form of journaling right there, without explicitly writing my feelings down. But so I'll share my story briefly. Mine has to do with a similar thing. Mine was around fourth grade. I went to a private school, predominantly white, and affluent. And so I had a crush on this girl, and seemingly she also had a crush on me. And this is about the time where you kind of start like fourth grade, fifth grade, like some of the more advanced children are like saying, this is my girlfriend. This is my, and the parents might even think.
Oh yes, or fast.
I didn't want to place any judgment. I just try to say like, the advanced children, but that was a like PC way of saying I'm running the show right now. Running the show.
Sorry. That's for the after hour show.
But I would say, so we would talk on through email and stuff, which is
wow.
We would talk through email. And actually it might have been AIM, actually. I'm sorry. It might have been AIM, which is a whole
You're aging
nother
yourself.
Yes. Either way, I'm aging myself because right now it's all about text or the apps, and I ain't on the apps because I'm off the market. Let's make that clear. Let's make that clear so nobody don't be
you can unsubscribe right now.
No, I'm cool. But so I'm not in on all the new stuff. But yeah, so back then we would do AIM and we were going back and forth for a while. And so enough for the next part of this whole story. And so it seemed pretty mutual, and there didn't seem to be any issue, or she didn't seem in school every day. We were fourth grade. So school every day, we had recess, we played together. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. You know what I'm saying? So all of a sudden, there was like a meeting that happened, and I don't know if I was called to the office. I can't remember the details of it, but I know my mom was called in or called. And so her parents had printed out the whole transcript of our how long we've been talking, the whole transcript. And they came in, and mind you, just a disclaimer, there were no lewd conversations. We were in fourth grade. There was nothing like lewd about the conversation. I mean, the most I might have said that felt like warranted to bring in would have been like, "Oh, I think you're cute," or something like that. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like just little kid stuff. Nothing crazy. So her parents had this whole big thing of, "Oh, I want him to, I want y'all to keep him away from our daughter. She doesn't feel comfortable." Mind you, like I said, there was no sign of this in our communication. There's no way I could force her to respond to my emails. There's just no way. We're in fourth grade. We barely talked in school. It wasn't like we sat up and had lunch together and did all this other stuff. We saw each other. We played like everybody did at recess, and that was it. So there was this whole big thing as if I was like harassing her, and she had made it clear to me that she didn't want any communication with me. So I say all that to say, they bring the that transcript in and they do all that, and my mom had to have the conversation with me of how I'm because up until that point I was just like Levi's such a good, respectful kid, and he behaves well and all that. But as soon as it crossed over into like, oh, he likes my daughter is interacting with him, as soon as it crossed over into that, it became a whole nother story. And that's when I first realized that the rules are different for me. So yes, I go to the school. I'm coming into like the tweener years where you really start to like notice girls and things like that. And so I'm predominantly being attracted to white girls because that's who I'm around all day for 7.5, sometimes 8 hours, 9 hours a day with after school stuff. And so to me, I'm just like, well, I'm just doing what all the other guys, like they're all like talking to different, of the girls and stuff like that. And so it hurt me because it was like, it was a place where like, I know I've always been a gentle giant. And so that is the first time I realized that everybody doesn't view me that way, that there's the majority of this nation, even those who claim to be allies or on our side. If I were to walk down the street at nighttime, and I know Josh has joked with me and said, if you walk down the street at nighttime and I didn't know you and you was coming down the street, I would be scared. He's joked with me and said that. But that's a different level. That's more so just situational or observational awareness in the sense of like, that's a big dude. It's nighttime and this world is crazy. Not because that's a big black dude. Like I believe if I was a white dude, he would also have the same being alert in the sense of, let me just know where he is just to make sure.
It ain't even just a big thing. It's like an alert thing in general. If we're both walking down the same street, I'm alert because, life and where we live.
I don't know you. So so that's more to that. But there's the majority of this nation that would see me. And I've heard like, one of my mentors, he's even said like people have said stuff. Now that's more the older generation that would actually say these things to you. But like, oh, I sure wouldn't want to run into you in a dark alley. and stuff like that. And these are in realms. This is a pastor, so this is in a pastoral realm that a pastor has said this to him. And so just that idea, and these people are, like I said, you would look at them and say these are good people. You know, they're doing good things, they're helping people out. But yeah, so that was the first time that I realized, like, okay, so everybody doesn't, like, my mom loves me, my dad loves me, my community loves me, but outside of that, everybody else probably thinks more so that I'm a threat. I'm a threat to them. I'm a threat to their safety. And so that's the only way that I could justify what they did was that they see me as a threat, and without even like getting to know me beyond the fact that I was just communicating with their daughter on email. If the issue was they're too young for this, that's a whole different situation. But that was never brought up. It was always just, she's uncomfortable and you need to keep him away from her, as if I was some type of like monster or something like that. And so that, like I said, that's a whole different situation. If the issue was, oh, they're too young for that, that would have been understandable. My mom would have been like, yeah, they are too young for that. But because, and she didn't really, and the thing is, the crazy part is she really couldn't add, and that's another thing, is learning more about that. She really couldn't advocate for me as much because she had no leverage in that realm. Like we just didn't have leverage. I was on heavy scholarship, and because we come from, we doing good for ourselves as Black people growing up, but we come from more humble, a more humble scenario than the rest of them. So they're all paying full tuition and donating money to the school. So is the school really, and would I say like, oh, I expect you to? I would love the school to have gone against them and been like, no, that's not, like, let me see this, let me read through this and get context. Oh, okay. No. This wasn't an issue. Now, if you're saying they're too young, then cool. But other than that, like, whatever you're talking about is off. But yeah, that was my thing. And yeah, it just changed my perspective. Like yours was was kind of like you looking back and saying like, wow, like that's how I felt about myself at that time. It's kind of like at that time, that's when I realized, and I carry that. I still carry that. That's something that I'm always trying to make myself not as threatening, because I'm just a big man. But that's why I love the cohort, because I feel way more at ease. I feel like I don't have to. I can express myself. They've given me the nickname Papa Bear, and so just that alone shows me that people there do feel safe around me. They do feel like I'm there with them and not there to harm them. But right. We can go ahead and move into the next question. How was your experience with racism? How has your experience with racism shaped you? And that is emotionally, socially, mentally, behaviorally, or spiritually.
Josh?
I feel like I've gone first the last couple of times.
Have you though? I'll go first the next time. On the
corner, I passed it back.
You want me to answer?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, racism. What a beast. Racism has opened my eyes to the flaws of humanity. And it's the ugliest parts of humanity, because humanity can be very beautiful, but it has sometimes made me very cynical. It's made me angry. It's made me resentful. It's confused me. It's mainly confusing. I can't say mainly, but it's very confusing. Like when I first started seeing bouts of racism, or when I experienced it myself, when I saw it, when someone else, a friend, told me what they'd experienced, it blew my mind, because it takes nothing from you to be a good person. And I don't know, I can't even really articulate how I feel about it, because they're so deep rooted in so many people, and I think that especially in our cohort, in our classes, in our grad classes, we've read texts, we've seen, history and how it's built off of Black people. We've seen how it's built off of slaves. We've, like, physically, not even just like, in the fields and things like that. Like, physically, our people have built this nation. And I'm so grateful to our professors who have taught us so many things about where even in this higher education program that we're in, where we've come from. Because I would have never thought that, you know, universities that are especially primarily white and that are Ivy League universities, that they have been, you know, built by slaves, and they have been, and we've seen the text and we've read that. So to have that knowledge then, and to see just the disadvantage that our people have come from, and then what we're expected to do, and then the hatred that we're receiving on top of that, I mean, it's disheartening, and it makes you not want to do it anymore. It makes you just, I mean, I know for myself, like this past month, I felt so helpless. I felt hopeless. There was like a week where I just cried. Like I just cried because, and I didn't know what to do. And because nothing was enough, like nothing, like signing petitions wasn't enough, and donating wasn't enough, and all these things, like nothing felt like it was good enough. And sorry, I go off on tangents sometimes, but I keep seeing these shirts, and I've seen them before, but they're becoming more popular now, where it's like, I am not my ancestors, like dash like these hands or something like that. It's like, I don't know where we got the idea that our ancestors were weak from. I don't know who came up with that, but people just assumed that because they were enslaved people, that meant that they were weak because they were choosing to be in that position instead of trying to overcome it. And I don't think people really realize how ingrained that was into people's minds. That slavery mindset, it's a mindset plus a reality. It's not just like, you know, you can't, it's hard enough overcoming a reality, but for that to be your mindset where it's literally been beaten into you. And then for your children and your children's children to have to kind of climb out of that, dig out of that hole that they have been placed in, it's not impossible, but that's an extremely difficult task. And that's something that I don't know when it'll ever truly be over. I don't know. And that's part of like why I think I felt so hopeless this past month, because I'm like, I don't like this is not, it ain't going nowhere. Like, and people who are so surprised when they see racism, I'm like, where have you been? And that in itself is such a privilege to not have seen it or experienced it, or to even know what it is. Like, people who are so surprised and they're seeing this ugliness, it's sad that I'm not surprised by it. I want to be surprised by it. I want to be like, oh, I want that shock factor. Like, I want that so badly, but that's something that we have known since we were kids. That's existed. We behave certain ways as Black people due to what we're taught, you know, and what we've seen. And so, not even going to get into like that whole, I'm sure that's a question that Levi will ask later, but we behave in a certain way because of how we're taught to behave and how we see other people in front of us behave, and et cetera, et cetera. And racism is no different than that. But to keep saying that it's taught at home, and to keep saying that it's all these things, it is. Okay, now what are we going to do?
Right.
Because as Black people, we can't keep saying all the things that we're saying. And we need other people to not be shocked by it. Remove your shock factor from this situation. Take it away. I don't want to hear how disgusted you are. I don't want to hear how sad you are. I don't want to hear how your heart is breaking. I don't want to hear it. Honestly, I don't. What are you going to do? Because we've been dealing with it for our whole lives. So what are you going to do so that I can live in peace? And that's not really the question that you asked, but that's where it took me.
No, it's good. I think
where I'm dropping it off.
Good. Because living in peace to me is being, or even if you want to use the word that's been touted as the American thing of freedom, living in freedom and in peace to me is being able to be who you want to be. Within the realm of course, not harming anyone else. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just let us be. Like, let us be. Why at every turn do you have to do something to our detriment? Why can't we just be, you know? So, but yeah, I think you answered it. I think you've answered it in a way of, from what I hear is we've learned to, you know, all right, we see somebody do this, and I know like my dad, especially being a young black man, my dad has been big on that. It's like, don't do this, don't do that, because it's all about perception. And so the part that I learned later is it doesn't matter how well you behave, how much you manage the perception, you can still have your rights violated, and you can still be killed up until your rights violated, up until being killed in the street. You know what I'm saying? So, and then after being killed, be further denigrated by them bringing up maybe the worst of your life to try to justify you being killed. And so just that alone is like, at a certain point, I think our generation is fed up, because it's like, what are we going to do if all the things that we were taught don't work? They don't work. We can do all of those things. We can go get a good education. We can be all buttoned up and wear suits every day. I see a lot of people that want to do that type of thing, and more power to you. You can wear your suits every day. I'm just not a big suit person. I like to dress up sometimes. I like to clean up sometimes.
You be fresh in class.
I like streetwear a little more than I like to be dressed up and pinned up. So to me, that's cool, and that's a tangent in and of itself. But my thing is, you could do all of those things. You could be walking down the street with a suit on, and you could speak to the officers with such presence of your education, in the sense of they can hear you articulate that you are an educated Black person, and you could still end up, because of that, it's like, okay, so where do you want us to be? And it's that place of like, you want us to be docile, and even when we're docile, you might still. So it's like, it just only gives us a chance. So you don't want us to be educated, because then we might be upstaging you. You don't want us, you see us acting, in a way that seems to be. And I say that because I think cultural differences are the reason why, and them making the dominant culture is the reason why they can say, like, if you're not acting in a scholarly way or in a, noble, whatever, the dominant culture, acting in a way the dominant culture sees as appropriate, they call it ghetto or, now ratchet or whatever, so and stuff like that, which cultural appropriation, now they've taken our stuff and made it okay when they do it. But when we do it, it's not. Well, that's a whole nother situation. But mainly it's like, so you're saying, where do you want us to be? And that's just, you want us to be silent and docile and not say anything. And so, and then that's the way that we can have the best chance or opportunity. But I'm gonna let Josh go ahead and answer the question.
Note to self: don't go after Elissa or Levi. Pass me the ball. I'm shooting from this point forward.
I tried to help you out.
All jokes aside, I think racism is so prevalent and so consistent through our lives and through my life. It's hard to say exactly how it's affected me, because it's affected kind of how everybody has then parented me. So, and has been around me. So I remember when, and this speaks to what you were saying, Levi, when I started driving, a part of my driving lesson was don't drive with a hat on. And if you have to drive with a hat on, drive with the hat forward. Don't drive with your hat backwards, because that the politics of respectability are so deeply ingrained because of that fear of what would happen if my hat was backwards and my music was loud. Or so when I think about how racism shaped me, the hard part of it is it's so prevalent that it's hard to find a way that didn't shape me emotionally, spiritually, and all that. So I'll speak to a couple of them and then close it. Spiritually, has been probably the most challenging in terms of how it shaped me, because I am a Christian. I believe that Jesus died on the cross for our sins, that he was risen, and that he'll come back. And at the same time, my entire life, I've heard that's the white man's religion, and I've seen how that's been used to harm people, and how even now evangelicals aren't speaking up in a way that is satisfying, quite frankly. They're not, I would almost say, stop it, they're not speaking up. But then I'll go farther, in a way that has any meaning or grit to it. So when you look at racism, on every level, it seeps into kind of how people interact and how the tactics that we use to survive. So whether it's how I learned how to drive, or how I learned how to walk into a store, how I learned how to pass people in the street. Like I noticed I work at a college, I work at a private school. I love where I work, but there's not too much diversity at that school. And I noticed that even now, somebody who's very comfortable in my Blackness, I try to make myself smaller in hallways because I'm passing people who I see are uncomfortable with me. So racism has seeped in so many different ways. But I think what was a big thing, there was a shift in how I, one, conceptualized racism, and then how I interacted with racism in college. So prior to college, and Levi knows this, Levi's known me, we've known each other pretty much our entire lives. But I was justice, I'm fighting the power, you gonna catch all this, you're feeling it. And I remember getting to college, I went to Westchester, which I think is the common denominator between all of us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I was class of 2015. But in the midst of being in college, Trayvon Martin happens, Mike Brown happens, so many of these situations happen. And I remember seeing the response, and it went from being a fire in me that I have to fight all this to a place of, wow, they're foolish. Like, there's no way that you can hate people that are as dope as people who fall under the umbrella of Black is without knowing them and not have something wrong with you. So it changed some of that fight. It's not that the fire's not there, but it went from I need to fight every single racist, whether it is verbally or physically, catch these hands. But it went from I have to fight every single time to saying, is that worth my time, right? Is looking at the individual worth it, or is looking at the policies that embolden the individual worth it? So I think my mindset has shifted from, if you're racist, that's on you. That's your personal problem. You're losing a lot of things. But let's look at the things that allow you to be racist and to think that's okay. So it's shifted kind of that way, where it's not so much individually driven as it is, what are the systems that keep this in place?
That is good.
That was a good question. That was a good answer.
I don't think you don't give yourself enough credit, man. That was like
Right.
You came in and we got on base, and you hit us home. Yeah. So I appreciate that insight that you gave, man. So make sure you keep giving yourself credit, brother. Give yourself credit. So I want to move into just to talk a little bit briefly about current events, but also a combination of current, because a lot of people, I saw a post the other day, and the post said, I think people, I forget where it's from, but the kind of the sentiment was, I feel that a lot of people, particularly those who are in charge, think that these protests are solely about George Floyd's inhumane killing, which I believe they sparked, but I don't believe that if they look at the outrage, this is not off of one incident. Mm-hmm. This is a historical buildup to this point, to where every other one we've done, if you think about it, we rah-rah for a week, then we go back to life as normal. Mm-hmm. Rah-rah for a week, go back to life as normal. This one was different, I believe. And I believe it's different, not because there's a protest every single day. It's not about the physical act of protesting. I believe it's different because I think there are people who are really now saying, you know what, no, we need to do the work after the protest. The protest was to get your attention. Now we need to go further and do the work after. But I think this post sentiment was, they think it's only about George Floyd. It's not. While George Floyd is the topic of this moment, we've also had, in the time span of the whole, before, we've had Breonna Taylor, to mention one more. And so that's a whole nother incident that we're fighting for now, because I believe they're still free. Those officers that did the no-knock warrant and killed her, they're still free. So I know states are starting to change their laws in their, the Breonna Taylor law, as far as taking away a no-knock warrant. That's not enough. We need justice, for one, but two, it just doesn't need to be state to state. This needs to be a sweep of the whole nation. So I like the gesture of a state saying, we're going to step up and do this. That's good. But we need to keep pushing, because there needs to be things that happen across the board in this nation that change. So that's what the post is about. So I want to kind of incorporate the historical aspect of what we've been seeing, and also the current, events. And I want to talk about it from two angles. I want to talk about your feelings and witnessing these things, but also want to talk about how you feel about the governmental response to these things, and that is the response to the protest, with the government, particularly with the one who's in. I'm not saying his name. The one that's in that seat, in that one seat we won't mention. The one who we don't mention.
Exactly.
How he's responded to it, and even the rest of the government. I'll throw it out there. We saw people, taking the knee, Congress people taking the knee with kente stoles on. Like, what do y'all feel about this? I wanted to go into my feelings. Y'all go ahead.
When I saw that, there's so many different layers to it. When I saw the kneeling with the kente stoles, I was like, if they don't get up and do something about this, this is not musical theater. I didn't pay a ticket to see a play. Okay, I would love for you. Right, it's not Hamilton. Why are you? For half y'all couldn't even get up when it was over. It's like, why? Whose idea was this? Who purchased? I saw this really funny picture where it was like, Kerry Washington, how she always makes that like snarl face, where she's like up against the wall, she's like snarling, and it was like the black intern pressing purchase on the kente order, and I was like, that's what it was. He was like, I don't want to do this, but I have to because I'm told. Like, why was that? Who thought of that? And why was that executed? It was such a stunt, and it was honestly, it offended me. I'm like, do you think that we're that dumb? Do you think that we're that dumb that we're like, well, you know what? They mean well, and they hear what we're saying, and they're going to kneel for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That's not what we want. That's not what anyone needs. That's not going to save anyone's life. Mm-hmm. And yet you're doing this, and it's just, it is offending. It's upsetting me and my homegirl because we want to know what's going on. If you can't even go to the store, where can you go? I don't understand that thought process. And it is your job to make change. And I think, like Levi said, it's not just about the state to state thing. And I think maybe it's easier to do it state to state because you don't have to worry about, I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's a basic human rights issue. The fact that this law has been passed without the people being arrested, mm-hmm. that's not how it's supposed to happen. You're acknowledging this is wrong. You're acknowledging that they did a bad thing. And your solution was to pass this law and to reassign those police officers, those detectives, whatever their job titles are. That was your answer to that. They did a very, very bad thing. We should not do that bad thing anymore. Say you're sorry. Okay. Is everybody happy now? No, we're not happy. Why was that a thought in their mind to even do that to begin with? Because that's a sneaky thing to do, and it's not lawful. And so the fact that that was even a thought that they did that, I don't see the connection here. I don't see how that person could still have their job when they cost this woman her life. And then the media stunts, the things that we see in the media, my media, I've been watching a lot of things on social media, and thank God for that, because normally I don't like social media, but there's just been so many things that people are filming that are like more accurate than the media. The media has been such a tool in all of this. And I think we've known that for a while. People who have both, like Twitter and Instagram and like, and also watch the news or just Twitter and Instagram, they've seen that, I think, for a while now. But people who are older, people who are maybe our parents' age or our grandparents' age that don't have that technology to really see what, like, I would show my parents something every day. I was like, Mom, look at this. Look what they did in it. What's happening on CNN? Because this is what's happening in the streets. Because they can pick and choose what angle they use. They can pick and choose what narrative they want to use. They can pick and choose so many things. Except for people who are relying on that as their sole form of information, that's terrifying. Because some people really do that. Some people really use they watch the news every night at 5 p.m., 6 p.m., whatever. And they take that and they run with it. And so that's what they're going off of to base their opinions on, like, these protests. They're seeing the footage of people breaking into stores, and they're seeing homeowners, or they're seeing business owners who are crying and talking about all the things that they've lost, to paint a picture of what this movement is, of what Black Black Lives Matter is or what people are there. And that's not what it is. Is it unfortunate this is happening? Absolutely. Is it unfortunate that some people are taking it upon themselves to steal things? Is it unfortunate that people are taking it upon themselves to be violent? Absolutely. But let's not lose focus of what people who are actually here to do, because it's not that. Anyone who's doing that is not doing it in the name of Black Lives Matter.
And also, let's not act like things like this don't happen over dumber reasons. Like, you know,
absolutely,
the championship and cars get flipped over and things get set on fire.
Oh, let's get specific. The Eagles. You saw the Eagles fans, because you know we're not gonna let y'all ride because y'all almost burnt the city down.
Listen,
y'all wouldn't have had a city no more after y'all won the Super Bowl. I'm gonna just point y'all out for a specific reason. That was a biased reason why I pointed that out.
I will hear no slander. I will hear no slander from a Cowboys fan. I won't do it. That's what we're not gonna do. Okay, so moving on.
I have a football team, so you might.
Okay, and what about it? And what about it? We're a very small city. You know, we're worried about politics right now. So,
but yeah, no, I agree with that sentiment though.
100%. That's a great point. I've seen so many pictures of somebody posted something where it was like, isn't this horrible? This is from one of the protests, and it was like just cars on fire, trash everywhere. There's a whole parking lot where there's just like debris. It looks like a war has happened. And they were like, oh, just kidding. This is from when someone won the Stanley Cup or something like that. Like it's right. Always okay. And it's, you know, boys will be boys, or it's, you know, they're passionate about their sports when it's primarily white people, or when it's from something more socially acceptable, like a sporting event. It's like, how does that affect you? How does how does a team winning or losing really affect you? Unless you bet on them, then I can see maybe a little mad if they lost. But how does that really affect your life? You know, so that's a great point, Josh, that you just made. But it's just, I mean, the whole thing, like I said, I mean, cue the tears. Like when I was feeling so hopeless, it was part of it was because of the fact that it was just being so twisted, and the fact that, you know, politicians are making these stunts, or they're doing all these things, and they're not seeing what the true purpose is. And it's not for lack of trying. Like they really don't want to see it. Mm-hmm. And when people are walking miles and miles, people are out here doing this in a pandemic. Corona did not go away. COVID is still here. Right. Okay. Right. So the fact that Black people who are, if you're listening to the media, dying at a faster rate from this virus than any other demographic, that they're risking their lives and their health to go out in these streets and be around people when we've been locked in our homes for 3 months, or however many months, if you are able to do that. People are willing to lose their lives or have a very serious illness because of this. That should speak volumes to you. And if it doesn't, I don't understand what else anyone could possibly do to make you understand.
Yeah.
So that's my rant.
No, that's good. That's good. That's really good.
Yeah, I think there are two parts of it in terms of how I've conceptualized what's going on. I think from the jump, the Kente Souls, the taking the knee, the taking down the Confederate statues, all of that is ridiculous because it's a bait and switch. Nobody protesting right now is saying take down a Confederate statue. We're saying reform, defund, or abolish the police. There's a very clear agenda of what people are talking about. So then to say, but we took down the Confederate statue. Ain't nobody asking for that right now, because that's not going to affect change. So it's the bait and switch of, it's almost like you're in the car with your kid and your kid's acting up. And it's like, if you act right, I'll take you to McDonald's. I do something nice for you. It's almost trying to buy protesters getting out of the streets. And probably for the first time in our lifetime, we're seeing people aren't going for it. People are like, okay, that should have been taken down, but what are you going to do about this? And what are you going to do about prison reform? What are you going to do about education? So I think I've been offended because it's clearly a PR stunt. It's clearly we just want you guys to be quiet, so we're going to paint Black Lives Matter on the same street that protesters had tear gas and rubber bullets fired on them when they weren't doing anything wrong. So in the street leading up to where that happened, we're going to paint Black Lives Matter. You're lying because you don't actually care about that. That's to get us to be quiet. So that's like the first kind of offended, like my offended reaction to it. My conceptualization of what's going on in terms of the outrage that we're seeing is that when you look at George Floyd, when you look at Breonna Taylor, when you look at Ahmaud Arbery, these are three very specific things that we're seeing. They are lynchings, and I think it's important to call it that because that is an American practice in which Black people are controlled through violence and through fear. They are terrorism. I think it's important to conceptualize it that way because it isn't just the people who saw it. It's so much broader, and it makes us afraid, quite frankly. Like, up until a couple of days ago, my wife didn't let me leave the house by myself. Like, I'd like go to do my normal thing where I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna run to the grocery store, and she starts getting dressed, and it's like, you know, we're coming on 4 years of marriage, 12 years of being together. She always lets me go to the grocery store. She doesn't want to. That's not her thing. But all of a sudden, she's like grabbing her stuff, like I gotta go with you, because it's fear. So that's terrorism. One of my favorite poems is by this guy named Javon Johnson. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, cop sirens sound a lot like low-flying planes in New York. That there's a certain fear that we have learned to gather, or we have learned to feel from these situations. So it's lynching, it's terrorism, and then it's demonic, it's evil. And I think it's important to categorize what we're seeing in those three ways because it allows us to have a response that is well put together. If the purpose of lynching is to keep us in our place and to make sure that we don't strive for more, then our response now is we're going to strive for more. So even with the fear that we feel, we're not going to stop. So that's one. If the goal of terrorism is to make us afraid so we then don't mobilize, we're not going to live in fear. We're going to feel afraid. We're going to process that fear. We're going to have that, but then we're going to act in courage and we're going to move forward. And then if the goal of the demonic act is to make us hate, then we're going to love. And I don't mean love in like the real, like sentimental, like, oh, they're just silly. Like, no, sometimes love is a clear and direct rebuke. Like, you love your kid, so you tell them and not to do something, and you discipline them when they do something that they should not do, right? You love your friends, so you're honest with them when something's going on. So when I look at it from those three lenses, a lens of lynching, which is what this was, and what these situations are, a lens of terrorism, which is clearly what this is, and then a lens of that this is spiritual attack and this is demonic. I then say my response is going to be that I'm going to live in courage despite being afraid. I'm going to keep striving despite the opposition, and then I refuse to give in to hate, which means that my love has to be direct and it has to be honest, and it has to be there has to be truth in it. There has to be some teeth in this love. So that's really been the way I've conceptualized it, which is why I'm offended that they're wearing kente cloth, because that's not accomplishing anything, which is why them writing Black Lives Matter on streets, it's not accomplishing anything, right? If we are going to operate in this manner, then real things have to be done. We have to decide what we're going to do about policing, what we're going to do about education, what we're going to do about prison reform, and then we have to take steps. And so I think that's the kind of my most immediate response in that.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. Go ahead.
What's funny is that so when I first saw the kente cloth, I thought of when I graduated from college, and I'm not sure if y'all had one when you graduated, but I had one, and got at the ceremony, and the ceremony itself and how like all that it took to get them, you didn't have to do much. You went to a ceremony, you took some pictures. It was like I feel like the honors cords and like that, like whatever other cords you get, those you have to do something for all your time at a university or at a school or whatever. You have to be consistent and you have to earn those cords. But that stole was so like, all right, here you go. And that's exactly what they used it for. So it's just so ironic. It's like, you did absolutely nothing to earn this, and you're using this for nothing. It's like the whole thing was just like a big old nothing.
And interestingly enough, building on that, the stole that we got was for the acknowledgement of how difficult it is as a person of color to make it through 4 years of school.
Right.
So not only we didn't have to do much, we had to make it, but then they didn't even make it. Like
right.
they showed up one day and somebody had ordered it for them. Like it was such a and excuse my language, but I'm using it in the proper way. It was such a bastardization of what that was that it took it completely out of context of what that's supposed to be.
It's just a very tone deaf act is what it was.
Yeah.
It's tacky.
So my response to that was so your response to our outcry for the injustice in this nation historically and currently against our people is cultural appropriation.
Oh my God.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
You're wearing something that you have no heritage that traces back to, that particular pattern that you put around your neck as this show of we're with you. How about you go back to your office and start creating some policy, write some bills, and do your job. Do your job. And I share the sentiments of Diddy that comes by way of another, I can't remember the name, but I was informed that somebody else had already made these statements. But Killer Mike actually talked about it, but Diddy had put he put up a tweet talking about voting, and he said the black vote is no longer free. And that's basically that. And so I share that sentiment, and I believe we all need to. I think we've been so loyal to the Democratic Party, but if you look at what they've done historically, and if you look at our favorite president before Barack Obama, of course, before Barack Obama came on, our favorite president, who we touted as honorary black. I mean, I think he's an honorary Sigma. Like I think, don't quote me on that. I think he might be an honorary Sigma or something like that. Or they might have just said like something like that, something weird. But I'm saying it to say we've embraced him in our culture so much. Don't quote me on that. I know the Sigmas might come for me and say that never happened. But you got to check whatever school. It's probably a school in Arkansas where he's from. That if that happened, that's where it probably happened. Do your research, and you can check me in the comments if you want. I'm okay with that because I just said that off the cuff. I'm speaking off the cuff. I ain't worried about the Sigma stuff. But anyway, because my uncle got my back. I'm cool. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is we embraced him so much. You know, he was the boy. Like we would let him host the cookout. That's how much we love Bill Clinton. But under him, the 3 strikes law. First of all, if you just want to look at the things that Hillary Clinton said about young black men or young black boys, I should say, just the whole super predator thing. Secondly, going even deeper than that, if you want to go laws and policy, under Bill Clinton, the 3 strikes law was something that he created that really added and deeply entrenched as far as the mass incarceration. Of course, we could trace that back more to like really to the 80s with Reagan, his run, as far as with the drug epidemic and war on drugs and things like that, where he criminalized the drug that blacks use and that black men, young men were selling and things like that. And then the same drug in a sense, but just in a different form, were lesser charges and things like that, and lesser time. So you look at that, you could say, okay, it started there. But he like furthered the initiative to his 3 strikes law, which is like if you just get in trouble 3 times, you're going to do time. Like period. Like that doesn't matter what it is or what level the crime was at. You got, it's going to get to that point. And so then you got the stuff with probation and stuff, which is hard. Like I know people that have been on probation. It's hard to maintain probation. It's hard to stay in program, so to speak. It's way harder to stay in program than it is to get out of program. And so my whole thought about that is he's Democrat, and we touted him as honorary black. Like we gave him like the rights to be a part of our culture, and he ate that all up. You know what I'm saying? But if you look back, and I remember like my parents' generation, they loved Bill Clinton. That was they bold. Like they was like, yo, Bill Clinton. They was down at the inauguration. It was like when it was, they went to the inauguration like everybody went to the inauguration. And I'm saying they would have did it again for Obama, but for different circumstances. But it was like the same. It was before Obama. It was Clinton that got that kind of reception from us. And so when we look back and we look at the things that he did policy wise and how he operated, he really didn't do much for the benefit of our community. Mm-hmm. And so historically, this has been the case. You know, it's like a feel good thing, like Josh mentioned earlier. I'm sorry. My wife just informed me on the live chat that he is an honorary Sigma. So I'm not wrong. So if you Sigmas come for me, I'm not responding because I'm just not wrong. So y'all better strip him. Y'all better strip him of that honorary membership. Y'all better strip him of it because don't come for me before y'all do that. But anyway, but like I'm saying, we accepted him and so I say like that to say our vote is no longer free. We have to move that way. So if we're going to put you, if we're going to be a part of putting you in office, you got to do something. Like if we're a part of putting Biden in office, you know, he made his little transgression about a month ago with his whole, like, I'm not sure you got to check if you're black or not, if you're going to still either not vote or vote for Donald Trump. And I'm paraphrasing, I don't know the exact quote off top, but just the fact that he was willing to make a step out and make a statement like that. First of all, I understand when people come back and say, oh, that was in poor taste and I shouldn't have said that, and they apologize. But at the same time, no, brother, you meant that. Right. you meant that. You didn't mean to say, you wouldn't have said it in better judgment, but that's the stuff you think about. That's the stuff you talk to your family about. That's the stuff you talk to the people who are close to you about. So let's not play games that act like that was a slip and you just made a poor choice of words in that moment. That is an ideology that you believe. You believe that if anybody chooses to either vote for somebody else, vote for Trump, or not vote at all, then they got to question their blackness. And I don't think, first of all, that's not his place. So that's clear.
Absolutely
I think we all know that. That's not his place. And two, it just shows you how much they have taken us for granted, and they just assume and they believe that they are the party that we should be voting for. And so that's my rant on that. My response, like I said earlier, was your response to all of this was cultural appropriation. Donald Trump, of course, and I said his name. I had to say this next part. I want to say this next part, and I wanted to be tagged to him. I don't want it to be confused about who I'm talking about. He took this was offensive to my my belief in the word of God and my faith, in a sense of he cleared the front of a church to take a to have a photo ops with a Bible. First of all, I don't believe that man has read the Bible, period. I don't think you could read the Bible without being tainted by ideologies of somebody else. I'm saying just read it for yourself and really take what is inside of it rather than adding to it like they did to enslave us, like they did to keep us in a certain realm. But just read it for yourself and then think that it was okay for you to clear the peaceful protest out of the front of that church with tear gas and rubber bullets just to take a picture with something that you don't even use. Just to take a picture with something you don't even use.
To humanize him, I guess. I don't know. And
to add to the ridiculousness of it, when he was asked whether it was his Bible, he said it was a Bible. Like there was just it was so like it was like whose man's is this?
Right.
Somebody get him.
They were like, "What's your favorite verse?" And he's like, "That's personal." What?
What?
I don't understand so many things about this man, but one thing I don't understand is like who is on staff? Like, is no one preparing you for some of these questions? Obviously not. He's like, I got this. And then he goes on like, nah, I really don't know. So I'm just going to say it's too personal. It's like, you could have said John 3:16. You literally could have said that. Everyone knows that one.
Literally.
You literally could have said that, and like, just to appease people. And I'm not going to speak about this man. I'm going to move on from that. Okay, we're done. I just wanted to make sure that was tagged solely to him and not to an abstract of somebody just being in the office. That brings us to our next, probably our next to last question.
And that is, what are some things that you do to process everything that's going on, everything that you've been through in life? And what and how do you relieve stress and protect your sanity?
Ooh. Uh, if I'm being honest, I haven't been the best at this. I think I've been so engrossed in wanting to stay informed and wanting to know what's going on that I haven't protected my sanity and my well-being as well as I could have, and really as well as I would tell my clients to. Like if my clients were telling me that they're doing what I've been doing in terms of consistently checking news, consistently checking social media, consistently thinking about it, watching TV, that it's always there, I would counsel them to do different. But I think
Right.
it's been such a hard thing to kind of get away from. So if I'm being honest, I haven't been, and that's been something that the people in my corner, my wife, my supervisors, have really been on me about. Of it's you're not kind of less invested if you unplug for a little while, and if you take that time to kind of gather your thoughts. So that's what I should be doing. That's what I would have, looking back, I would have liked to have done, and that's what I would advise people to do. But I hadn't exactly done it myself.
No time like the present, brother. I definitely detached. I did like a little Facebook post, just saying this is my last conversation or last comment on this whole situation. And those things surrounding it, like your Candace Owens and stuff like that. I was like, I gotta stop. And so I really haven't been checking into all of that. I've been on to do stuff for the podcast and of course Diamond Arrow Tribe. But other than that, like I've had to pull back from all of that because this, like I said, this whole episode to me is about us just processing through, not really trying to figure out. I think as a community, we are very educated across the board. Even those who don't go to college are very educated people. We have to be, first of all, we just have to be educated because this is the only way we have a chance, a shot at making it through this life and living a life full and long with our family, as far as like just being able to have some of those things that we dream of. But so we have to be, and I think there's a place where we always get into this like tactical strategic place, but we neglect like the process and moving towards actually healing, because we have some trauma that is woven into our DNA from generations and generations ago, talking about all the way back to not just slavery, but the act of taking our ancestors from Africa and bringing them here. So we have trauma woven into our DNA from that, and there's some stuff that I believe we need to process through before we even start to do the whole practical, like, oh, we need financial freedom, we need, XYZ. We do need to do all of those things. We need to build those infrastructures to build generational wealth. But we are also, at the very least, 401 years behind in regard to that. And so I think there's a place where 401 years, if you want to just look at 1619, as far as when the first slaves arrived on the shores. If you want to look from that point on, we had trauma from at least that point. But I would go, like I said, back to the kidnapping from, Africa. So that is a traumatic moment. And then going through slavery on top of that. So I think it was mentioned earlier when we talked about, Elissa brought up the fact that our ancestors were not weak. They weren't.
Right.
First of all, think about the whole idea of being taken from your homeland. Not just that, you're mixed in with a bunch of other tribes. Y'all don't speak the same dialect. Y'all don't speak, the same language. Y'all don't move the same way, because people don't understand that Africa, which is the name that colonizers gave it anyway, but that's a whole nother story. But Africa was not originally about being a bunch of different states. It was literally millions of different tribes. Millions of different tribes. So every tribe had their own way of communicating, their own way of being and everything. So they took these people. This is how deeply demonic, like you mentioned, this is. They took these people and they brought them here and mixed them all up on purpose so they couldn't communicate with each other. So there's a whole level of, okay, I'm in a foreign land and I'm around, not only am I around people who may look similar to me, like physically, but we know we're not from the same tribe. We know we don't speak the same way. We know we don't speak. So there's a level of how much confusion there is there, and how much they had to spend, how many years they had to spend trying to figure out, well, how can I communicate with these people? How can I create, a community or a tribe with these people, since these are the people I'm with? First, I got to come to grips with, I'm not home anymore. Then I got to come to grips with, I don't know this land I'm on at all. Then on top of that, I'm around people who are from different places and tribes, and some of these tribes were people we're at odds with each other. So then they had to work that stuff out with the language barrier, and then come together and say, well, look, we look like each other. We're in this foreign land together. We're both in the same situation. We got to build something here. And then that's when you get down the line and you get to the communication aspect. You get to, of course, generations start to learn English. But yeah, so when you brought that up, I said they weren't weak. They had, like, we're talking from a place of like of a certain level of privilege, where we have, it's not even that we're smarter than them, but we just have the cultural capital now, in the sense of we understand the language and we see the systems, because we're more integrated into being able to see everything. So we just have the benefit of being there, whereas that was the beginning. So they had to go through what they went through for us to even get to this revolutionary point where we're like, nah, we've seen this historically, we've watched this unfold in front of our eyes, and now we're going to make the change because we understand your system and we understand that that's wrong. We're attacking the system. I think a lot of people are coming to the awakening. I've seen a lot of people who are Pan-African and against whites, maybe in their language, shift to say, you know what? It's not necessarily about the individual or the white person in my community. Like, yeah, what they do is hurtful, but it doesn't hold me back in a systematic sense for them to say, call me, the N-word, or for them to treat me a certain way. That's just hurtful socially and psychologically to me. And I need to be able to, this is what this is about, process that. But there's a deeper system thing that we need to work on. But I think before we can get there, we have to talk about how we process all of this and how we protect our sanity. And I'll say that for me, that's what I've done. I've kind of detached. We know the story. And it's not out of irreverence for George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Ahmaud Arbery. And there's actually more in the mix of all of that. Smaller stories that aren't getting the light, but actually people are starting to talk about them and bring them up. Things that have happened within the last 3 to 4 months in between all of the bigger stories that were raised up and elevated. So I just think we have to process before we really, I think that has to be a part of I think we can do both, but I think it needs to be a very definitive focus on really processing how we feel. So yeah, Elissa, you can respond to that.
Yeah, there's a lot you said just there. But oh man, I want to say so many things. Okay, so I'll try to mash it all together. I guess going off of your last point that there's more than just the stories that we're hearing now. It's more than just, I'm going to say, use the word just very loosely. It's more than police brutality. It's more than discrimination. It's more than, just one thing. It's not just that Black people are killed at a higher rate than white people by the police. It's not just that Black people are incarcerated at a higher rate than white people. It's not just that. It's the fact that, and so many things are coming out now, things that we've already seen. So, and it might seem not as important to some people because of the subject matter, but it's still important to others. It's still important to Black people. So the fact that there is not as much diversity in corporate settings, the fact that there are brands that are owned and there's no Black people that are making decisions, like beauty brands or just clothing lines or, magazines or, editorials and things like that. The medical field, people who are, so I think it's so funny when people, I don't think it's funny, but it's a little ironic when these very young white people that are posting these racist things on different social media platforms, and then the schools are alerted to that and they are retracting their admissions. And these people are saying like, they're like, kind of like, woe is me, like, you know, I didn't know, I'm young, you shouldn't. It's like, but you gotta understand that that person who is saying these racist things now, I'm not saying that they're a bad person, but they also could be someone's doctor in a few
Right.
years. And that person,
Yes.
and we already know the medical field is terrible in the sense that Black people are not treated with the same respect that white people are. I mean, the reason that Black women die in childbirth at a higher rate than white people, why is that? Like, where some doctors believe that Black people don't feel as much pain. Like, it's just, people have been studied, medical students have taken surveys where they really truly feel that Black people do not feel pain at the same rate that white people do.
Right.
So they don't believe them when they say that they're in pain, that they need these tests done, that they say they need medicine for this pain or whatever ailment that they may have. That's an issue. So when I say that it's more than just, that's what I mean. It's so multi-layered and multi-tiered. There's so many different ways where I think people are overwhelmed by it. And by people, I mean white people. They're overwhelmed by it. And so they're like exhausted. And so someone earlier on social media was like, if you're like a white person like me, you feel exhausted, you're starting to feel exhausted, post something. They try to say that they should like be posting about like donations, or like, you know, if you're feeling tired from all the social activism you're doing, girl, it's okay. I feel the same way. Just post on your page, this donation page, and it'll rejudge you. I'm sorry. Have the past 14 days exhausted you? Are you tired? Seriously?
Crazy.
You don't get to rest. You don't get to rest. Sorry.
Nope.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of layers. And we've been telling y'all that. Like the fact that, I mean, it could be as simple as like, as a Black woman, I seriously could not find any makeup in my shade until like I was out of college. That's wild. Like,
Right.
and so it's as simple as that. Like, yeah, makeup can be whatever. If you don't wear makeup, that's fine. But like that means that's a multi-billion-dollar business. People are making money, and you're forgetting an entire demographic of people. Why? Because it's harder. It's more work to make darker shades. If you didn't know that, now you know. So yeah, it's there's so many different things to it. So I guess this kind of ties into my self-care or how I'm handling all this. I am very fortunate and blessed that I have an amazing support system. My friends have been there for me. My family is there for me. Where I can't do it. So when I was going through my things and I feel all these different emotions, and it is hard because you want to stay informed. So you have to look at the news, or you have to look at social media. You want to get that information so you're not clueless and oblivious to the whole thing. But at the same time, that takes a toll on your mental health. You feel all these different emotions, you feel all these different things. And one thing that I hope that people are doing is that they're not so much processing what those emotions feel, but that they're feeling these ways, and they're not letting any kind of barrier prevent them from being true to who they are. So what I mean by that is that earlier I was talking about journaling and being a kid, and Levi, you were saying like, you know, as a young Black man, like we weren't forced to journal. And that's part of it too, where like we have this idea of what it means to be a certain type of person. So we have this idea of what it means to be a strong Black man. We have this idea of what it means to be a strong Black woman. And not say those ideas are wrong, but what you need to do for yourself, it should not matter what anyone else thinks of that. And if anyone would ever come to me and say that I shouldn't sing in the shower, or that I should not go around my house singing tunes obnoxiously, who's to say? That's part of my self-care. That's part of what makes me feel better, you know? So as a silly example, but you know, it's sometimes you need to do more than just talk to someone. But I'm very fortunate that I do have people that I talk to, my girlfriends all the time. We're like, mental health check, how you doing? Like, it's something as simple as that, where, you know, my friends and I can randomly FaceTime each other during the day, just like process all the things that are happening, just to talk about it, because to just let it eat up at you is not healthy, and it's not going to, you know, be productive for you. You need to talk to someone about it. You need to just voice it in whatever way that you can. So I've been doing that. Sometimes very basic. So I do self-care Sunday, and it makes me feel better. So like I will just watch something trashy. I'll paint my nails and do a little face mask, and that makes me feel better to a certain extent. Good. Sometimes it's those very small things, and men can do self-care Sunday too.
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely. So I recommend it. Get you a nice little face mask, do a little manicure, whatever. But it's about finding joy in those small moments. And, that kind of for me works a little. It might be a little superficial, but, it kind of helps me to reset a little bit from all of it. So, yeah, talking it out and crying it out. I was just like sobbing on my couch the other week. And I was like, why? Why? And I was just crying and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop crying. And, I tried to stop myself at a certain point because I feel like, I do want to be strong in a sense. And I think for a long time, I associated strength with a lack of crying. Someone who can hold it together is a strong person. But there's so much strength in being weak. And I hope that people will see that. There's strength in numbers, but there's also strength in your weaknesses. And I think that we need to start embracing those parts of ourselves, because that's also where we grow as individuals. I mean, I know that we're focused on like rebuilding society, but when you're thinking about yourself, you got to think about how you process things and just what makes up who you are. So there's that. Oh, there was one other thing that I wanted to say. Sorry.
Go ahead.
You were talking about education, Levi. You were talking about how we have to educate ourselves, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about language, because I think that language is such a weapon that people use. It also obviously helps everyone a lot, because the wider our vocabulary, the more articulate and the smarter and the more intelligent we are, just as people. But language can be used as a weapon, and what I mean by that is that it can put barriers up between us. So it typically, when someone the higher the education level, the higher your reading level, the higher that the more words in your vocabulary, because you're learning all these words and you're using them in your life. And so it's a very simple, flow of how things work. But at the same time, things can be, I don't want to say dumbed down, but simplified in a way that everyone can learn this information. And I think that we have to make sure that when we're trying to teach someone, that we're using a language that can be widely accepted and understood. Because if we don't, then we're just talking. Like, you're just talking because you know it.
Yeah.
And it's like, just because you talk a lot don't mean you know the most. If I learn anything, I've learned that. So, I mean, we're all very chatty people, which is great, but just because you talk a lot doesn't mean that you're being understood and that what your words are being appreciated. And we owe it to ourselves as humans to share knowledge with other humans and to make sure that that knowledge is truly understood so they can share that with somebody else. But to use language that divides us so sharply, that's only going to put us at disadvantage, I think. So I think language is just really big, especially right now, to make sure everyone just learns as much as they can.
Yes. No, I definitely agree with you. You don't ever have to give a disclaimer, particularly talking to me or even my brother here. We're big on, it's important that as a woman, particularly in this conversation of Black women, that you have the space. Because even if we want to say that the issue of police brutality and stuff is more affecting the Black man, just by proximity, it's affecting the Black woman. But we're seeing, like with the story of Sandra Bland or recently with Breonna Taylor, it's not just happening to men. So you have every right in this conversation as to how we process and move towards healing, as any man does. And so any realm that I'm in, you're always going to have the space to speak as much as you want, because I think a lot of times through how history, and this is by nature of just the patriarchal society we live in, and that kind of being reduplicated in our community, women have been kind of that, like, oh, be quiet, sit to the side, you're behind the scenes, like you can add, but you add to us, and then we go out and we say we're the front people. But I think that time is gone. It's time to walk side by side. And at times it's time for y'all to walk ahead of us and be the main vocal presence, and we be the back and pay attention. And I don't think that has anything to do. I think this idea of manhood that we've had ingrained in us is just so now we can look and see it's just so outlandish because it literally takes a man and just makes him like this one-dimensional, like just a like a being that's just supposed to always have it together and never like give up his ground on anything. And it's just important though. I wanted to point that out though, as Black men, that we let our women, not even let, because that's even an interesting word to use, and be having this conversation, but we stand back and you know, have women to lead as you are capable of doing, not because we say you're capable, but because you just are, just because you are. So I wanted you to know that. I wanted all the women that are watching to know, yeah, speak up, and don't let anybody, don't let men tell you, we ain't trying to hear that. We, you know, because there's a contingency of us in this kind of movement and wanting to have progression for our people, that kind of have those patriarchal views, like the man is supposed to be up front talking and saying this, and the women's supposed to be over here taking care of the children. But that's not the case. That's not the case at all. Women can do so many things, and that gets into, you know, we're, as Black men, we make less than our white counterparts, and women, y'all make less than us. So it's like, it's so interesting. And if we want to point out a fact, the Black woman is the most educated person.
Educated. We want to talk about it because I'm just saying.
That's just facts. That's, if you want to look at just hard numbers, that's just, if you look at it from the way that they designed education. I love that you brought education back up, because we also have to realize that there's education that's happening within our community, particularly, that isn't being touted as education because it's not, it doesn't fall under or assimilate to the you know, under the auspice of the dominant culture's idea of what education is. So the dominant culture would say, go to college, get your 4-year degree, get a master's degree, you're educated. But there's education that's happening that if you took those people who are getting those degrees and put them in some of these scenarios that the people in the Black community have to deal with, they wouldn't know what to do because they don't have that education. So then in that realm, they would be uneducated, but they wouldn't say that because it doesn't fit the narrative that is education, and they just have a different form of education. And I want to say now that it is, that's why I said we as Black people, we have to be educated. Even if we don't get a 4-year degree, even if we don't get a master's, we're educated people because we have to be to survive. There's no way in the world you could tell me that a person who lives in a low economic situation, and maybe below the poverty line, but still keeps food on their table and a roof over their head and clothes on their and their family's back, is not educated. That's an educated person. So we have to shift all of these ideas and say, like, okay, it's cool to, like, not knocking education. I'm getting my master's degree. You're getting your master's. Josh has his master's. We're not knocking higher education. We're not knocking it at all. What we're saying is you can be educated in so many different ways, and they're all valuable. They're all valuable. You know, imagine if we get to a situation where we got to be resourceful. We get to, you know, climate change and all that, and the world is, you know, things are becoming more scarce. Imagine if we have to be more resourceful, and we're a person who's maybe more, you know, used to being in the middle class or upper class, and we never had to be resourceful. We just have money to throw at everything. Where now money don't mean anything because everything's so scarce. Guess who we gonna be looking to help us out? The people that's been living in poverty because they've been making it happen with less. So they're gonna be able to show us how to do those things. And so that's like what I want to say as far as to your education point. Just kind of going into the wrap up, what I would love right now, and I believe the viewers would love it as well, is if you could, as a Black woman, we'll start with you, Elissa, speak to the Black women as for a final word, and to the little Black girls.
To do. Okay.
Yes, and so I'm going to give you the floor to do that, and then we're going to close with Josh. He's going to do the same, and then he's going to give us his also his therapist viewpoint as far as what we can do practically to start moving in the steps of healing.
Awesome, thank you. When you were talking about like Black women, I was just like, oh, in my mind, I was like, I love Black women. And I just kept saying it over and over again in my mind. I love y'all so much. I love being a Black woman. what I would say to Black women out there, obviously, I love you. We are the strongest people. And I don't mean that one-dimensionally. I mean that in so many different ways, because I'm not sure if y'all have seen the movie Fences before with Viola Davis and Denzel Washington.
Yes.
Yeah. But for those who haven't seen it, to give you some context, Denzel Washington, they were living in the 1950s, 60s?
Somewhere around that time.
Yeah. And Denzel Washington is a hardworking man. Viola Davis is his wife, and they're going through a lot of struggles because, you know, he wanted more for himself. He wants more for his children, and he's very displeased with his life. And so they get into this huge argument where Viola Davis, she's just tired of being his punching bag, because he's so unhappy with where he is as a man, as a human, as a Black man, as a husband. He's just so disappointed. And so she's like, what do you think? What? You haven't been here alone. I've been with you we've raised all these kids together. I've been your wife. I have taken care of this house. You know, I've been in the same spot as you. And I've been holding on to you. I've been holding on to you, Troy. She says that because she wants more for him. She, you know, I think Black women, we have this this innate inherent role to be a support system to our partners. And it's a role that I find myself falling into very easily when it happens. But I mean, not everyone has that experience, but I think that oftentimes when Black women do fall into that role where I know some strong Black women. My mom's one of them, my sisters, my aunts, strong, my cousins, strong Black women. And they are so fierce, but they hold on to so much because they have to be that for their families. And I respect them so much because it's who they are. It's who they've grown up to be. And it's not always fair necessarily, because where do they come in? Where is their due? Where is the thank yous? Not just on Mother's Day and their birthdays. You know, it's like, where, even if they're not a mother, where is the thank you? It's a thankless job to be a Black woman, and to then have to combat with the world and expectations, and then also with Black men, because Black men can say some of the most hurtful things to Black women sometimes, and all we do is support. Mm-hmm. Support. And so it can be disheartening sometimes. You're like, you know, it's like, it just seems, like I said, like a thankless job, but at the same time, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love being a Black woman. To anyone who is younger, who identifies as being a Black woman, I would say that you are so much more than what you think you are right now. You have so much more in you to not only to give, but to just be. And you don't always have to give to be worth something. You don't always have to prove yourself to anyone. I know that Black women are statistically the most educated, but you don't have to be that educated person to be worth something to someone. You don't have to earn degrees in order to make a difference in the world, in order to prove something to yourself or your parents or to Black men or to your white counterparts. You just are, simply by being. And I wish I could tell younger Elissa that too, back in her journal with Zach. You know, you are something just because you exist. And that is such a special thing in the world. But if you do have it in you to give to other people, if you have it in you to be a mother or a wife or any kind of, you know, spouse, if you have that in you, that's beautiful as well, but that does not solely define you. So
I love it. That is excellent. That is excellent. I love it. You have the floor, brother.
So I'll address what I would say to young Black men and Black men in general, and then I'll jump into the mental health kind of element of it. My message to Black men is relatively simple. It's two things. If you're young, don't lose it. If you're old, find it again. But don't lose or find your joy. I think one of my favorite things is that we're in a church community where we have a lot of young people, and our little boys are so free. And I was a free little boy, and I'm sure at some point you were a free little boy. And then life puts on us that burden of fake manhood, of being tough and being hard and stuffing our emotions and continuing to move forward no matter what. So finding that joy or holding on to that joy is so essential. Shedding that hardness, that impenetrableness, because not only is it hurting us, and I think it's important that it's hurting us, it's hurting the people around us. Like, I love that you referenced Fences. I cried through that entire movie.
Oh yeah, same.
Yeah, like I went to that movie with one of my best friends, Brian Johnson, and there's a point where like I literally pulled my hat all the way down. I like sunk into the chair. I was like, no. But the beauty of her response to him was that he was so caught up in where he was disappointed. He had become so hard that he wasn't tender to the person who was holding him down. And because the world puts that hardness on us, we become so engrossed in that we're then not able to be soft with the people that are doing so much to hold us up. So that'd be the first thing. Keep your joy, and then if you can hold not to take on the hardness, don't take on the hardness. And if you've had taken on the hardness, it's time to shed it. So that's the one. And then two, we would not be so attacked if we weren't so important. So there's a level where the attack that we face in terms of police brutality, in terms of just random violence, in terms of even violence against each other based on how we've been taught, in terms of how the education system fails us, in terms of how the prison system has taken us in, all of that is designed to keep us out of communities where we're needed. So understanding that you're needed and that you're important, that your importance goes beyond your ability to play ball, your ability to write rhymes, your ability to prove how tough you are, and that your importance is really in your presence and your vulnerability and your honesty. So those would be the things that I would really tell to Black men and then Black youth. In terms of moving into the mental health, man, it's so much, and that could be an entire podcast in and of itself. So the first thing I would say is don't be afraid to go to therapy. I think for the long time we've developed a distrust for systems, and understandably, when you think about all the terrible things that like the government has done in the name of helping Black people, it's understandable that there's not this sense of trust. It's understandable that like, why would I go somewhere and have somebody tell me how to live my life? But one, I ain't never told nobody how to live their life. Like, I ain't smart enough to tell you how to live your life. I listen to you and help you figure out steps of how to live your life. But therapy is so important. Having somebody who is objective, who is not directly in it, but who cares, journey alongside of you to help you get to your goals and help you understand yourself emotionally, how you respond to things, unpack trauma. There's just so much that we have to experience. So that would be first in terms of an overarching thing. Go to therapy. There's a lot of really dope therapists of color, Black male therapists, Black female therapists in the city. I was blessed enough to have a cohort that was very diverse. So we're out here and we're more than willing to help. So that'd be one. Two, specifically to this situation, there would be three things that I would tell people to do, all within the realms of emotions. A reason why I don't like speaking after Elissa is because she already touched all these things.
I'm in the wrong master's program. I'm just kidding.
But the first thing I would say is learn how to identify your emotions, right? So a lot of the times we don't know what we're feeling. We're feeling like we know something's going on, but we can't quite put words to it. So you ask somebody, how are you feeling? They'll say, I'm all right. I'm good. I'm bad. But those aren't quite feelings. And learning to identify, I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling hopeless is important because it allows us to then put things in place and coping strategies in place to build on those. So the first thing I would say is learning how to identify it. There's some really good resources for it. If you Google the feeling wheel and then look at images, it's pretty much a wheel that has multiple rungs to it. And in the middle are like some common feelings in terms of angry, sad, happy. And then the next row out is feelings that are related to that. And then a next row is feelings that are related to that. So it's really building that emotional vocabulary so we can know what we're feeling. Once we know how to identify what we're feeling, the next thing that's really important is acknowledging it. A lot of us are great at knowing, man, I'm sad. And then somebody asks, how are you? No, I'm cool. I'm all right. I'm still moving. So learning to say, I'm sad, and then somebody asking, or even being able to sit within that sadness and say, I'm sad, like this is hard. And then learning to accept our emotions, that our emotions are not always things that we have to change. Like so often, like we get to something and we know it and we acknowledge it, and then we try to move out of it. And really, it's important sometimes to say, I'm feeling this, and it's okay that I'm feeling that. I'm not going to judge that I'm feeling that. In a lot of respect, there are a lot of senses, it makes sense that I'm feeling that, and that's okay. So if you're feeling hopeless right now, it's okay to feel hopeless. Now, we don't want to live hopelessly. We don't want to stay hopeless. But if we don't allow ourselves to feel hopeless, we can't get to that next session. Or that next place in life. I have something that I say to my clients. I'm blessed to work with younger clients, so I come off more wise than I would work with older people. They would be like, "We done heard that already." But sometimes when I'm working with clients, I'll say, "What we bury grows." So if we bury anger and we bury hopelessness, we bury sadness, we bury despair, we bury stress, then what's going to come out is anger, sadness, hopelessness, stress. So learning to say, I'm feeling this, and I'm not going to let it get deep. And I'm going to tell people what I'm feeling is really important. Everybody invest in a journal. It doesn't have
mine.
It doesn't have to have superhero stickers all over it. That's my thing. But invest in a place where you can write down what you're feeling so you can track your progress. Sometimes what happens is we don't notice how things have changed and how our feelings have changed because we're moving so much. So 2 weeks ago, you might have been feeling hopeless. Today, you're feeling sad, but there's some hope there. But because they are quote unquote negative feelings the entire time, we don't notice that difference, and we don't kind of have that overall overlook to see the process. So those would be the three kind of basic things. I also think it's really important to have a support system. Your support system can be family, if that's a healthy support system. Sometimes it's not. Friends, a church community. It can be a therapist. It's really important to build that. That whole idea that we can make it by ourselves is bogus. It's baloney. Like we really need to get rid of that. That people, you need to let people in your head. Dr. Walters, he's one of my mentors. He was a pastor at our church for a while. He always says that your brain is a dangerous place. Don't go in it by yourself. That there's a place that you gotta let people in. So build that support system. But right now, in terms of processing, just getting to the place that we know how we feel, we can acknowledge how we feel, and we can accept how we feel is just a great step, because then we won't be burying those things and they won't be coming out in places when we'll be able to move through it in a more healthy way. So we won't be 10 years from now and the anger from this then comes out, or the hopelessness from this then comes out. So it's this really important to be able to kind of and I'm mixing metaphors, but it's looking at yourself emotionally as a garden, right? You have to tend to things. You have to plant the right things. You have to uproot the things that aren't healthy, but you don't always do it all at once. Like sometimes you let things sit in the soil to grow. Like I recently started a garden, and I have both seeds and bulbs, right? So bulbs stay in the ground all year round. I don't have to worry about them too much. I put them there and they'll continue to grow. Seeds I have to consistently replant. So our bulbs would be our values and our principles. Those are the things that are planted like deep in us. And then the seeds are things like we have to pursue joy. You have to consistently be planting and watering joy. You have to consistently be planting and watering your purpose. You have to consistently be planting and watering relationships. So I know that was a lot in a short period of time, but it's really getting to that emotional level.
Oh,
that was
great.
good. That was really good. I'm sure I'm blessed by it. I'm so sure that anybody who gets to see this will be blessed by that. That concludes this episode, this 6th episode. We did a lot. We had a lot. I want to thank you, Elissa. I want to thank you, Josh, for coming on. My brother, my sister. And I don't call it any other way. We plan on doing a Father's Day episode next week, similar to what we did for Mother's Day. But of course, as everybody knows, I'm expecting the birth of my son, and this could be any day now. 38. So stay tuned. We plan on next Saturday, I should say, 4 p.m. Going back to the 4 p.m. time. Having episode for Father's Day. It'll be called The Pillars of Society, some of what Josh has mentioned. And we'll have my guest will be my father.
Nice.
Ray's father will be on, and a good brother of mine, Raheem, who you do know, Josh. Raheem Frazier will be on as well. We wanted to have at least one young father on, as well as our father. So look out for that. That's called The Pillars of Society. We'll do that next week. And as long as my son, who I think has a mind of his own already, doesn't decide he just gonna drop. And yo, I really hope that my son drops on June 19th. I really hope that he does, because this will just solidify type of who I am. So I'm speaking that right now. June 19th, next Friday. So we have that going on. That concludes this episode. I just want to thank you all again for coming on, and be on the lookout for more content coming your way.